Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the ArtTour International Show, the television presentation for the ArtTour International Magazine. And today we have a very special Art to Heart interview with an artist that was featured in the anniversary issue of the magazine. He's participating in a digital exhibition here at the Grimandi Art Gallery. His works are very unique, very appealing, and very intriguing, and we're going to discover a lot about him today. And he's Raymond Westraadt.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for participating, for being here with us, for showcasing your works to New York. And well, let's talk about your works. Let's talk about what you're doing, what you're creating.
Right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to start off with. It's really been an honor for me to be here. My work is very influenced by artists such as Edward Hopper, Charles Schuler, and what I do with my work is I try and look beyond the obvious. So my work is very architectural in structure, in style, but with an element in it that sort of pricks the subconscious somewhere, that there's something in it that's slightly different. So over the years, as I've practiced art, I've looked at subject matter not just with my eyes, but also with my brain. And I'm looking for those elements in an ordinary scene that might make you want to feel slightly uncomfortable or searching, something that's beyond the familiar. And that is what I try and translate onto my work. If I refer to one of my works in particular, a work that I painted in New York of a water tower, I've been to New York a couple of times, and everybody sort of looks at ground level or at face level because it's so paced. But the minute you look up, there's a totally different world. And that would appeal more to me than the obvious street corner scene. So that is the kind of image that I try to project in my work.
Okay, there is a message underlying all your works and those subject matters that you are choosing very particularly. Is very different, very unique. Is there a message that you are directing that you would love the viewer to discover?
There certainly is, and that's why I love to select my work by myself. I spend time, when I see an image, I spend time with it. I sometimes touch the building, I touch whatever it is that I'm trying to paint, because I'm trying to get some form of, call it energy, off of the scene that I'm wanting to paint. And when I sit in my studio and I'm looking at the work, because obviously when I'm in a place like New York or Philadelphia, I do take photographs. If I have the opportunity, I do a couple of thumbnail sketches. But there's something about that image that has to stay with me. It's not been unusual for me to put my face up against the side of a building when I sit in my studio and I'm working, I go back to that moment and I try to absorb that. So what I do is I push that through, or I push that emotion which I'm experiencing at that time through into my work. Now, I know that sounds quite crazy, and what I'm trying to do with my audience when I finish a work or while I'm busy with a work, very seldom do I deviate from that which I initially set out to do, because I have got a strict message that I want to convey to people. Buildings where people live, where they work, define you as an individual, really, in terms of even where you live or where you work. It's something that you would be proud of, something that you want to be associated with. So when I paint something, and I can relate to this as a South African artist who loves painting scenes from America, which is unusual back home. I have my client base in America that respond to what we would, I suppose, term Americana, that which is familiar. So where maybe in South Africa, the scenes that I paint from here are a little bit foreign. But certainly what I'm trying to do with the work is to just touch that subconscious. And I always say to people, when you look at my work, I want one of two reactions. I want one that says, wow, I like that because I can associate with it, I can recognize it. Or I want somebody to say, you know what, I don't like that. And that's fine by me, because at least it's evoked an emotion. If somebody looks at an artwork and says, that to me is art failure, big time, because there's nothing. I want people to look at it and say, yeah, okay, there's something here. I love, for example, as I mentioned, the work of Edward Hopper, where it's an ordinary scene, by and large, but there's danger. There's something in the shadows that's there. I love the fact that an artist like Charles Shearer will take and put those shadows in his work, which just gives it that extra dimension. So really what I'm trying to convey to people is that feeling of familiarity, number one, but secondly, there's something going on here that is not necessarily disturbing, but unfamiliar, but also familiar, if I can explain it that way.
And it's exciting. I love, what I love about your work is that you do feel the emotion. You capture the atmosphere and kind of bring, you bring the audience in to the scene.
Right.
Which I find very challenging. I'm an artist myself, and I find very challenging doing with architectural works and, lines and shapes.
Yeah. My family, my brothers, we all come out of a background where they're all engineers, architects, etc., etc. And my father was of the school that my brother and my immediate brother and I, Stephen, should be architects together. And he is a very successful architect in South Africa. I joined him in the practice, although I studied graphic design. I didn't want to do the technical aspects of architecture and things. It appeals to me. I love it. I look at a building and it's something that really, really inspires me, not just to paint it, but to look at it, the structure, the organization. So I was in practice with my brother Stephen for a number of years in an architect's practice, and then I totally deviated and went into finance for about 20 years, where I worked in global stock markets, and I was in this absolute creative vacuum where I didn't pick up a paintbrush. But when I went to London and I was doing due diligence on these stock markets and things, lunchtime was always the Modern, the Tate, whatever, go and sit there and look at art, because it really, really juiced me. So coming out of that entire background where everything is, you've got brothers who are engineers and we in that kind of environment, for me it was an extension of that which I love. I remember the first time I sat down in a studio after 20 years traveling the world and being in finance, the first thing I started painting sort of out of my head was a little cottage. And it was sort of indicative of where I was going to go. And it was really copy art. It was look at something painted, and that was it. It was a representation of what I see. It's only as you go along where you start to discover that it doesn't have to be. I don't paint landscapes. I don't paint animals. I don't paint people. I don't paint still life. I appreciate them, but I don't paint them. Because for me, it doesn't allow me the freedom to put those elements. Maybe you can say a building that I'm painting, a street corner, whatever, is a kind of a landscape in its own right. But it mustn't just be recording for recording's sake. It's got to have something in there that sets it aside from just being a landscape, if you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So that is what I try and convey to people. If I can prick the subconscious of somebody with an image, with something in a painting that says that there's a familiarity about that, then I feel the work succeeds. It's not going to succeed to everybody, and that's not the point. And I must say I'm quite selfish, because I paint what I like, and I don't paint. I do paint for people when they say to me, I've got this building, a business or whatever, and I want you to paint it for me. I will do that because that's what I love to do. But very seldom, it's very difficult for me to reach and go beyond that parameter, not because I'm not skilled enough as an artist, but because I just don't like it. And I'm quite selfish in that way. I paint what I like.
And that's wonderful, right?
It is.
That's wonderful, yeah. You get to choose your subjects, and you're free to that.
I do.
Yeah. So you come from a very structured background.
I do, yes. And I'm not upset by it. As I say, I remember the first time my daughter took me to MoMA, and all I wanted to see was Christina's World by Andrew Wyeth. I've been to the Brandywine River Museum so many times because Andrew Wyeth, to me, although my work is very different to his, he captures that which I seek in my work, that not darkness, but that mood, that atmosphere. And it's beautiful. And I remember coming up the stairs, and there was Christina's World. And the first time I saw it, I almost cried. I mean, I'm a big man, but I can admit that. And right next to it was Edward Hopper's mansion. And at that point, I realized that your art transcends the obvious. And I think I've learned a lot from that experience. And every time I come to the States and I look at things differently, because I'm building on that which I'm still striving to achieve. But I certainly have models and people that influence me in a certain way. But I still want to remain individual. And I think every artist strives to be that, you know, to be individual in their approach and then in their art.
Absolutely. And I think you are. I think
that's
you
very
are.
kind. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you.
Talk to us about the works that are showcasing in the magazine that you chose. Why did you choose? Why did you choose those works? Let's begin there.
Because this is New York, I thought that I would include works that have that familiarity about it, which I mentioned earlier. So some of them works are New York. I think there's one work in the entire collection of work that I have here, which is the wheelchair painting, which is not associated here, but it's universal. It's something that talks about the state basically of healthcare throughout the world, not just in South Africa. Everybody has their unique problems. But the body of work I chose predominantly here was to me a mix of works from Philadelphia and New York. And of course Philadelphia would feature quite highly because when I come, this is my third trip to the States this year, and I spend time with Gabby, and I love the juxtaposition of old and new. But what's also interesting for me, and if I refer to the work called Market Street, which is the big blue one with the traffic light in it, that traffic light wasn't there. And I just loved the reflections. There's something about reflections in my artwork that takes it to a different level. It's not just the building anymore. It's a reflection of something else. And I just loved the way it played. But when I'd finished the artwork, I loved what I saw, but it was almost lonely. There was nothing grounding it. There was no association. So the traffic light that I've put in there, which is very unlike what we have back home, was something that grounded the work in Americana for me. That is something that you would find on every street corner.
Yes.
So that to me then takes it to a different level. I don't just go and I photograph one scene and paint it as it is, because that's boring. Take the photograph, blow it up, hang it on the wall, done. No. I remember we were sitting on the corner of Delancey and Avenue of the Immigrants about 2 years ago. And Gabby was sitting opposite me and we were having lunch. I'd gone to another gallery, which I won't mention, but we were sitting in this huge intersection, and there was this building, which was the Cohen Optometrist building, and this single sort of traffic light just swinging in the breeze. And what caught my eye, and I just snapped it, I remember just snapping it, and when I got back home I looked at it, but in the corner of the image was this signboard that said Avenue of the Immigrants. And I loved the traffic light, because to me that is so quintessential American. Okay, so I put it down on canvas, big work, put it down, but there was something gnawing at me all the time. Something was wrong. And when I was here, we kept on hearing about the build-up to Trump and Clinton, and Trump and Clinton. And they were both talking about the migrant, the immigrant vote, you know, and it's important, but yet you kept on hearing about this wall stuff. And it just came to me one day that if I include a bird of prey, a carrion feeder like the raven, and put it on the traffic light and turn the traffic light on, it takes an ordinary scene into a totally different dimension. So I included that, and all of a sudden it elicited so much discourse. People started talking about it. The argument was, why is the traffic light on when it should be off? It should be red, stopping people from coming in, because that was half the message coming through. But my understanding of it was, whoever was going to win the election needed the migrant vote. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of exploitation of people when they get here. So it's, yes, come on, the light's on, it's all coming through, and yet that bird was just sitting there, and it wasn't a robin or something, it was an aggressive bird. that would wait for you, that once you're in the system, it would exploit you and pick you to the bone. And I tried to defend the situation by saying, it's not a political statement, because I don't do that. And somebody just said to me one day, don't go there, it is. Which has got nothing to do with me when I think about it. Well, not just when I think about it. It's my message that I got across. So I guess that is what I'm trying to illustrate in terms of what I'm trying to convey with my work. In all of them, even if it's just a straightforward building, there's got to be something in a window, something that is dark, something that makes you think about what it is that you are seeing. I try and relate to that little spark in a person's brain that says, I get it.
Beautiful. Tell us about, how do you plan your work? Let's go to your studio. How do you go about your creative process? Where does it begin? Where does it, I can imagine you travel, so you get all these incredible ideas.
I do. And my subject matter is limited, actually, when you think about it, because I would take a scene, I have a painting, and I'll get back to answering that question. I have a painting that I did of 3 different places on one canvas. One was from New York, one was from Philadelphia, and the other one was from Lancaster County. And I included them all in one painting. So the idea there would be that, as opposed to just painting 3 individual paintings, I wanted to create a scene that was good for me, that I really, really enjoyed. So when I sit down and I go through all of my work, I've got a feeling of what it is that I want to convey. And then I go and look for the subject matter, and I try and remember what it is that I'd photographed. And when I get to that photograph, I then look at how do I want to manipulate that. And remember, I said to you up front that I go and I touch a building. I've gone as far as licking a building once, because I wanted to get that taste of what it was that I wanted to experience. And while I'm sitting there and I'm drawing out my work, I go back to that memory. I go back, I try and get that taste, get that texture, which then I try and translate into my work. And as I say, very, very seldom do I deviate from that. The bird on the traffic light was different. That was and that was sort of a deviation, because I'd finished the painting, I loved it, but it was missing something. So as I develop the work, things do come to me, but certainly within the structure of the work. So I work oil on canvas, that's all I do. I remember at art school that I was terrified of oil because it was so definitive. Yet when I think about working in placas and acrylics and gouaches now, that to me is definitive. Once it's down on paper and it's dry, you cannot do anything about it. Whereas with oil, I can go back a week later and manipulate and expand on it. So I love working in acrylics, at least in oil paintings. That to me is part of what I'm trying to convey.
Wonderful. You know, I love hearing you, because I love sharing this with the audience, and the reason why our interviews are heart to heart. I always say the message of the artist, the message of the works, regardless of what the artist is painting, starts with the heart.
Correct.
And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
You know, it starts here, that's your message, and then you choose.
I think it has to, because why do it then? I'm not a copy artist.
Exactly.
If I was a copy artist, I wouldn't be doing this. I see friends of mine who sit there and they've got commissions lined up to do my dog, to do my wife's face and things like that, and fantastic. But I can't do that. Maybe because I'm selfish, and maybe because I do strive to something that I want to convey. And yet I think if I ever were to sit down and paint a portrait, I might thoroughly enjoy it, and maybe I'm scared of that. I don't know. So at this stage, it's self-indulgent, but not in an ugly way, because I do believe I want to reach out. You know, your home defines you as a person. Buildings define people where they live. You're not going to live in somewhere that you're not going to be proud of. It's something that you're going to push. True. So a building to me is a structure that makes sense, that is immovable almost at that moment. And that's what I like about it. There's a permanence about it, and a reminder. I remember when I grew up in Southend, in a place called Southend in Port Elizabeth. We grew up in an area where during the apartheid years, it was almost a sin to be there. It was a black, white, colored, Chinese, Indian. Everybody lived together. And then the government at the time decided to destroy that because it didn't suit their model. And yet part of that was very informative and very formative of myself as a person. And I remember looking at things as a young, almost a young child, 11 years old, and seeing that wanton destruction. And you'll see in my narrative, in the book, I talk about growing up in an environment where wanton destruction was the norm. That is what people wanted to do, to separate. And I don't want that. I want people to look at something and there's got to be a commonality, something that brings you together, either in emotion or in a visuality where you can look at it and say, I understand that concept, and we're not going to break it down and destroy it. So those are things those are elements in my work that I try and pull through that will hopefully resonate with people.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you. And I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I want you to share with the public what's coming up for you in 2019. We're almost there.
We're almost there, yes.
So what should we expect from you in 2019?
Well, I think certainly just an approach of expanding on where I'm at.
Okay.
There are some big art festivals, if I can call it that, back in South Africa that I would probably get involved in. My immediate goal, if I can call it that, is to reach out into this market, into the American market, because this is my subject matter. I do have inroads into Europe, which is fantastic for me, and particularly in Germany, where I don't know if it's a German thing where they just love the structure of my work and it makes sense to them, but certainly getting my work giving it more exposure in New York or in Philadelphia would for me be, because this is where it's happening.
Yes.
You know, this is where it's happening for me. So if that avenue can open for me, I mean, that would really be the sort of the epitome of where I'm at the moment, or where I would like to be.
All right. Well, and we're going to be looking for you. If anybody wants to visit your website, it's
www.rjwestraadt.com.
Alrighty, and you're reading it right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to visit the artist website, support the arts, and above everything, stay inspired.